your call is important to us. How many times have you heard that? So while you're listening to the worst hold music known to man, and you've got to play it loud because you can't keep your phone to the ear on, you're trying to work for 45 minutes. But he's saying, if it's that important, answer the fucking phone. You know what I mean? Just answer the phone. And then it says, the train's cancelled. Well, if the train's cancelled, so you're entitled to compensation. Have you ever tried to go through that? You go to the website. The website says use the app. You download the app. The app says contact customer support. The customer support sends you back to the website and look at frequently asked questions. It's just ridiculous. I'm not making a complaint anymore. I'm playing customer service bingo. Absolute crazy. So then you've got to have your ticket number, journey ID, seat number, your fucking blood type, just to get your £6.40 back on the train. And you think, I'm not applying for a mortgage. You've just not provided me the service.
Hi, it's Mark from the Digging Deep podcast. Just a quick one before we get started. Over the past few weeks, we've had more than 15,000 views and listens across the podcast, which is brilliant. So first of all, thank you. But what we are seeing is that a lot of people are watching and listening and not subscribing. So if you are enjoying the podcast, I'd really appreciate it if you could take a moment to subscribe, whether that's on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. It makes a big difference and helps us keep growing, bringing in great guests and improving the show each week. Also, give us a follow on social to keep up with everything we've got going on. Right, let's get on with this week's episode.
Yeah.
Go on.
Go on.
How you doing? Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming back on. Morning, David. Morning, Mark. Morning, Charlie.
Morning.
Good morning.
Lovely.
How
So
are you?
we'll crack straight on. With today we're talking demolition. With David Morrissey, or Dave as we know him, from Berkeley Demolition. So when we're talking demolition, from the outside it looks like smashing down buildings, but in reality is one of the most technical, high risk and misunderstood parts of construction, I think. You know, where people don't really appreciate the skill and the technique that go into it. It's one of those things that just seems to happen, and the normal building contractors turn up and there's a clean site. So we're getting into the demolition world, the skill, the risk, the business side. And as I said, we're grateful for Dave Morrissey to take time out of his day. So normally, before we start, Dave, we normally get a few stats from Mark. He's known as Stato in the background. So if you give us a few of them, Mark, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll throw a few stats out there for the listeners. So UK demolition industry is worth 1.5 to 2 billion annually. 90% of demolition waste is recycled in the UK, so demolition and construction produce 60 million tonnes of construction waste each year. And a lot of people probably don't appreciate that demolition isn't destruction. It's actually one of the most advanced recycling industries in the UK.
Blimey, didn't know that. Well, look, before we get into you, Dave, what we do normally is we get it off our chest, what's doing your head in. But before I ask any of you what's doing your head in, I think I just got to get this off my chest. You know, I don't know how you guys feel, but I'm going to rant this week about customer service and what the lack of customer service or what's going on. And everyone who's heard me before the last couple of weeks moaned when I was moaning about one bit of customer service, which was the Airways, Virgin Airways. Good morning, Virgin. You know, and how I was 3 hours delayed because of a few bread rolls, because they couldn't get the bread rolls on the plane for the first class passengers, so we all had to wait for 3 hours. You know, that was my first, and it just seems to have been a domino effect, a complete domino effect. So, like last week alone, it started off where I've been waiting in my block where I've got an apartment where I stay for work, and I stay there a few days a week, and the bins cupboard ain't been emptied for 4 weeks now, literally overflowing. So I thought, I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to contact the management company and tell them the bins ain't been emptied, and they've been not emptied for 4 weeks. Now, I'm not going to ring up after a few days. I mean, the rubbish is coming out of the door, literally. So I rings her up, and the lady goes, "Oh, well, you know, I was there last week. I can't remember it coming out And first of all, we're on the back foot. Excuse me, I'm a customer resident here, and all I'm just telling you is the bins ain't empty. Now, if you don't want to do nothing about it, then why don't you let me contact whoever I've got to contact, and I'll get it right. So I was thinking, okay, that's the first thing. Yeah, so I'll send a nice email and say, look, this is it, pictures and all that. And I thought that's how my day's going to go. That's not a problem. So we'll move on. I'll come back to that. There's a reason why I'm going to come back to that, and I've stopped here. So then I goes to get a train, and the trains are cancelled again. Right. So every Saturday, Good Morning East Midlands Railway, every Saturday without fail, when I'm coming out of Wellingborough into St Pancras, and I do go to London quite often on a Saturday, meet some friends or whatever I'm doing, they're always cancelled for safety reasons. Now, they can't explain to me this that there's a safety reason, but there's a cancellation and then there's a train coming after they've cancelled my one, and then there's two cancelled after that for safety reasons. So I said to the guy, well, surely if my train's getting through, one of the trains is getting through, that's a safety concern on its own, isn't it, if there's a safety issue? Because how does one train get through and not the others? Rather than tell you, and they lie, they're on the back foot all the time. There's no, sorry, sir, yeah, the truth is that we ain't got the staff or whatever. It's just a load of bullshit that they give you, and then they look at you as if you're kind of a nut for bringing it up and losing your shit. And then the worst thing, I don't know if you know, guys, so I gets down to London. This was how my day was going. And I get a phone call before I go into this nice restaurant. I'm going into this lovely restaurant, and I get a phone call back from the management company about me bins. And they said, well, we've been round there and we've cleared a bit of the rubbish because the council, I don't understand, they say that they go there every week. Basically calling me a liar. No, they don't go there every week. Otherwise, it wouldn't be coming out the door. And then she said, but in the recycle bin, there was one box with a few of your letters in, and you're not allowed to do that. I'm going, hold on a minute. What are you talking about? I'm the customer. I bought it up. The reason why that's in that bin is because there's no other room in the other bin. What is wrong with you? Well, you can't. They won't collect it. So I said, because I've got a couple of letters. And a couple of videotapes, I think, from old school time in the recycling. You won't.
A couple of videotapes from old school time, Mark.
Yeah, but it was like CDs. There was a few CDs I found here. And she's trying to tell me what I can recycle and what I can't recycle, and what's got to go in and what's got to go in. Considering we run a bloody waste company for so many years, but we know nothing about this recycling. So then, anyway, I'm going on. The worst thing that happens, right? You go into a restaurant now, right? And just try and tell me this, right? You go into a restaurant, and it's not a cheap restaurant, and you wait 20 minutes for a drop of water. Then they come over, get your food, you order it, and I'm not trying to big up where I was or anything, but we're talking each course was at least £60 to £80. Okay, which is a lot of money, yeah. And it comes. One dish came really too over salty. My steak was well overdone, and this young girl, bless her, I'm just saying to her, look, this food ain't really acceptable, and I'll go and see the manager. And then come back later. She comes back and she says, "Oh, what we're going to do is we're going to give you a free dessert." I said, what are you on about? And where's the manager? The manager sent the girl back. Yeah, he sent her back over, and he offered me a free cheese plate, and probably a bread roll that I was waiting for since when I was flying back from New York, and free cheese plate. But what about the £120 worth of shit food you just plied me? So you're presuming that I'm going to have to spend more money with you, and do that. So what I thought I'd try and do is I'd come up with some code. So I've been researching some code, right, of what things actually mean, yeah? So this is the customer service that's gone to shit, absolute shit in the UK at the moment. Right, and anyone out there, please make a comment and tell me your stories, because it is one thing, doing mine absolute Sweden at the moment. Yeah. So these are the meanings, what I call customers service ironies, if you like. And the first one, when you ring up and you try and make a complaint, we're experiencing higher than normal call volumes. How many times do you hear that? Translation.
Every day.
The translation to that is this is completely normal, and we just don't want to hire any more staff. That's what I think the translation to that is, and everyone hears it all the time. So when when is it not higher than normal? Can you ask me? I reckon probably, Christmas Day at 3 a.m. I don't get when it's not higher than normal, because that's get all the time. Then you get to the website, then you get this live chat. Click now. It says chat now. Your number's 47 in the queue. And then the agent all of a sudden leaves the chat, and I've had more reliability from a Friday afternoon subcontractor. It's just doing my absolute nutting. So
Seems
the
like
next
a really stressful week, Mark. I'm not going to lie.
yeah.
Mate.
So the next thing is, what you always hear. Please stay on the call. Your call is important to us. How many times have you heard that?
Loads.
So while you're listening to the worst whole milk music known to man, and you've got to play it loud because you can't keep your phone to the ear on, you're trying to work for 45 minutes. But you're saying, if it's that important, answer the fucking phone. Just answer the phone. And then it says, the train's cancelled. Well, if the train's cancelled, sir, you're entitled to compensation. Have you ever tried to go through that? You go to the website. The website says use the app. You download the app. The app says contact customer support. The customer support sends you back to the website and look at frequently asked questions. It's just ridiculous. I'm not making a complaint anymore. I'm playing customer service bingo. Absolute crazy. And then you've got to have your ticket number, your journey ID, your seat number, your fucking blood type, just to get your £6.40 back on the train. And then you think, I'm not applying for a mortgage. I'm you've just not provided me the service. You said you should be able to go on there, click the button, and the money is refunded.
I'm sure it's designed to basically trap people with a couple of questions in, and they think, I can't be asked for this.
Yeah, it's definitely.
Exactly that. So you go. It's like it's the Ryanair thing, is it? They're famous for making refunds so complicated that people just give up. It's just design frustration. And then British Airways are famous for only making comments after people started having a go at them on public on social media. Public shaming. But then you've got the other thing, which can't, you've got to go through all that like a mortgage just to get your £6.40 back on your thing. But you go to Amazon and you order a fucking sofa and you say you don't like it, they'll refund it straight away. No questions asked. Bang, it's refunded, and they probably won't even come and pick the sofa up. So you've got two, I just think, like, final off, sorry, I'm going on one, but it's just disappeared, customer service. It's been outsourced to systems designed to outlast your patience, like you just said there, Dave. It's not customer service anymore. It's customer endurance. And that's what I've got to sign off and say. Thank you. End off.
You definitely needed to get it off your chest, Mark, didn't you? I tell you.
It's a therapy session, Dave.
Yeah.
Well, what have you got, Dave? What's doing your head in, Dave?
Well, something that's always done me head in, as long as I've been in this business, is retentions, which could be coming to an end. Could be. Whether it does or not. It's been announced in the construction news, everything. Oh yeah, we're getting rid of retentions. Seeing is believing. I don't think they'll ever truly go away. But just finished a little job, 2-week job, 5% retention. I phoned up the QS and I said, it's not in the order. He said, oh yeah, but our systems have changed. And I said, but it wasn't on the last job or the one before or the one before that. He went, oh yeah, but what it turns out, they've got a new sort of financial director in, who's literally sat down with them and mostly said, we can earn this much more money a year, because it's like chasing retentions. We had it on a job years ago, 2 years after we'd finished doing the cut and carve, and they said, we haven't got practical completion because the painters are in there doing a bit of snagging work. And I said, snagging? What's that got to do with the demolition that I'd done 2 years ago, after the building went?
Yeah.
You're talking to me about painters.
I know, Dave, I know companies, and I've sat with companies that have had £5 or £6 million and more
Yeah.
owed to contractors on retention. Absolute shocking. It's just, and then all of a sudden, a guy turns around and says, "You." And I've seen this practice, yeah, because I've been in the industry. Yeah. Oh, we owe you 150 grand. I'll tell you what, though, if you take 75 now and just get done with it,
I'll do it
then,
now.
then we'll do it now. Otherwise, you're going to wait a long time for that 150 grand. And a lot of people are like desperate for the money,
Yeah.
and they just accept it. And I think it's a shameful practice. It's just like I think I don't agree with contractors having to even get paid by main contractors. I think your kind of work should be paid directly from the developer
Yeah.
and cut the contractor out. Even if they should get a management fee for managing you, shouldn't they? That's it.
Yeah. I've always said it should be the payment should come from like a contract bank account, not the main contractor's bank, because it's in there. You look at the margins they work on, and it's like, and I see it on LinkedIn. Oh, what a fantastic year! We've done this, we've done that. These are our projects. You just think, well, without your supply chain, without your subcontractors always taking a hit on retentions and everything else, you wouldn't have made that, would you? And your project wouldn't have been all that gleaming and lovely. And
No.
I always notice as well, it's, oh yeah, and the team are, and it's always the architect, maybe the mechanical engineer, or themselves, and there's never a mention about the painters, the decorators, the M&E company, the demo company, the soft strip company, the bricky, nothing. They never get a mention, and it's like, oh look, we're fantastic, and this is the finished article thanks to us. You just think, yeah, not really. That's one thing that really does get to me. Is just always picking themselves up.
I think there's a good point there. I think there'll be a lot of people out there listening to this that will jump on the bandwagon on that as well and say and agree with you, and hopefully they will and have some comments about that, because I get the pain. I think it's a practice that needs to stop, and hopefully what you've said there that's out floating in the news. But there'll be some other way, won't there, Dave? There'll be some other way that they.
Yeah, they'll come up with something else in a contract that they'll withhold a bit of payment, and because right now there's mostly financial directors in companies going, shit, how are we going to make a better bottom line if we're not holding retention? But knowing damn well they don't release the whole amount of money. I think we've had it 4 or 5 times on bigger contracts and one was McAlpines, and in all fairness, they turned around, the job got terminated by the client because they saw a bit of a recession come in a few years ago, said, look, the job isn't what we planned it to be, so we're going to shelve it now. And in all fairness, I sat down with the QS and he turned around and went, right, Dave, there's this outstanding, and there's your retention. Boom. Just paid it straight away. And that was like one of the exceptions. And there's some out there, 2-3 years down the line, I'm still chasing them for retention.
Does that make you put your money up? Because you're going to, isn't that just for the issue that you're going to up your rate a little bit because you might need the money?
I mean, you try and up the money, but then you're always in a competitive tender. And then there's someone else that always says yes. Perhaps they need the work or whatever. And we're only a small company, relatively. And then it's just made me more choosy who we do work with.
Yeah.
Because you just think, well, I don't really want to work with you anymore. And they've got some good people on site and all the rest of it. But then when you get to like commercial, you just think, I don't want to work with you anymore. It's like life can be hard enough, and then you just think, then you've got to deal with that every month or at the end of a contract, and you just think, no, I'm done. I'm done with you. I don't want to work with you anymore.
Yeah,
so
right.
we sort of like got to be a little bit more picky and choosy who we work with.
Well, look, before we get into the demo side and your side, before Charlie tells us more about his haunted house, how about you, Mark? What is it? What's happening with you?
I've got just quickly. I've got a TV on a wind-up. It's actually been going on for a long while now, and I probably should buy a new TV, but I can't fault the TV. So I've got a TV in the bedroom, and it always does it when I'm short of time, right? So if I've been out and I've got back and I think, well, I've got half hour to watch an episode of my program or whatever, and I'll get showered, jump in a bed, turn the TV on, right, and it's got these 3 flashing lights that come on, and then the programme comes on, and I just think, oh, lovely, yeah. And then it'll go, boom, off, and the fucking red lights start flashing, and I'm like, what are you doing, right? And then I'm having this fucking wind up with the remote, and it won't come on. So the only way you got to get it to go on is I've got to get up out of bed, which I really don't want to do now. I've got to get up out of bed, go to the TV, put my hand up the back of the fucking chest of drawers, and I've got to turn the socket off, turn it back on again, get back into bed, right, just to find out on some occasions it'll fucking do it again.
Oh, mate.
And I'm like,
Yeah,
what is
get
that?
a TV, Mark.
What?
So get a new one.
All your stories about that you got, by the sounds of it, is because you got deep pockets, and short arms.
I don't know what you're talking about. It's a TV.
Your hotel antics when you was in the pod, the other week. Now your TV that's probably you bought it in 1987. It's probably that deep, isn't it?
Yeah, that square one.
It's a black and white. I've got to tune it in.
You're turning the dial just to get the thing going.
You know, analog's no longer a thing, didn't you, Mark?
Maybe that's the problem, Dave, yeah.
What about you, Charlie? Anything going on in your world?
Do you know what's been doing my head in, Mark? So, and it's a saying, and I've been thinking about whether I should bring this up or not, because I didn't want to sound like a complete idiot, right? And I didn't want it to be taken out of context either, because it's also something that I say myself, but a lot of other people say it as well. And it just, for whatever reason, just absolutely does my head in. And have you ever asked a question, right, and to somebody, and their answer is, I don't mind.
Oh, that's a woman's answer.
I don't mind. You can't say that, Mark. That's crazy. You can't say that. Yeah, but the answer is I don't mind. And I get it. Well, for whatever reason, in every walk of my life, and like I say it too, at points, yeah. So I'm not like slating everybody that ever says this, but I'm just saying that it just does my head in. For whatever reason, it does my head in, because I'm asking a question for an answer, right? Because I don't necessarily mind what we do, but their response is that they don't mind. So if they don't mind, then I'm giving them the choice when I'm asking that question, aren't I, to make the decision between one thing or another, because I'm not making that decision. Because
But you've answered your question, haven't you?
well,
I said it's a woman's answer, and you said no, and you've just admitted that it's a woman's answer.
nah, it's not. It's not.
It's the same as that episode in Only Fools and Horses where Rodney turns up in the Free World Band, and I can't remember her name. Is it Norris gets in, the girl? And she goes, where do you want to go, Norris? She goes, I don't mind. And he goes, should we get something to eat? She goes, no, I've eaten. He goes, oh, do you want to go cinema? She goes, no, I don't fancy cinema. He goes, well, where do you want to go then? She goes, I don't mind.
Literally, I've not even seen that yet, and that's exactly what the situation is, right? Because you go and ask that, I don't mind, and then it's like, it comes back to me, and I'm like, well, I've asked the question to give you the choice, but I don't really mind either. So now it's like, well, now both of us don't mind. So what the flipping hell are we doing? Like, but like I say, this is with men. This ain't. I'm not even going to say this, Mark, because you can't say it's just women, right? It's everyone, right? So it's like with it could be with the lads, it could be all like, I'm easy, or I'm easy, or I don't mind, or anything really. And I'm
Maybe
like,
it's your generation, Charlie, because I have to disagree with that. Because if I say to my mates, what we're doing Wednesday, they'll say, I'll meet you down the Cock. We'll be have a few pints, and how about that? And we'll see it from there. And you go, okay, that's great. And then you know what you're doing with blokes, yeah? You say to a woman, you say, what do you fancy eating tonight? I don't mind. Okay, shall we have a Chinese? No, I don't want a Chinese. Should we have an Indian? No, I don't fancy Indian. What about pizza then? Well, don't fancy pizza. Do you want to cook? No, I don't think I'm going to cook. Well, what do you want to eat then? Oh, I don't mind. So that's my life. So maybe it's the thing. But I'm telling you, if you ask a few blokes and throw it out there, they'll say, yeah, do you know what? We'll have a Chinese. How about that? We had an Indian last week. Yeah, no problem. Fantastic, sorted. Yeah. So you can all have a go at me for being sexist or feminist or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I think that's. Well, yeah, I do get you, Charlie. I do definitely get that.
It does my head in. It really does. But then, like I say, I have said it before, so it's like you know, I guess I think it comes down to being too polite, doesn't it? Sometimes it's sort of like you feel like maybe like polite if like you've ever said that, because it's like well, you know, you're giving someone else the choice, you know, to sort of make. You're being a bit fair because maybe you think you make the decision a lot of the time. So it's like it's that sort of thing. But yeah, it still does my head in, even if I do say it myself, you know.
Well, look. So
have you noticed? Sorry, Mark. Have you noticed as well? If you're going out somewhere, the difference between men and women, right? So, meeting some mates uptown, and we're going like have a few beers, go to football. It's just one phone call. What time are we meeting? 1 o'clock. Usual. Yeah. See you then. That's it.
Yeah.
And the wife goes, "Well, when you say that, where are you meeting? Where's the usual?" I said, "Well, Cash Points in Victoria, NatWest Cash Points." Oh right. And I said, "That's all. That's it. That's the conversation done. I will see him at 1 o'clock." I said, "When a woman does it, oh right, yeah, we'll do this, we'll do that, and then so what are you wearing, and then what time train are you getting? All right, well, I'll give you a call on the train, and yeah, okay, all right then, yeah, and all right, yeah, text me, and it just goes on and on.
it does go on there.
It's like, what are you doing?
I'm not, we're more like if you're not there at 1 o'clock, I'm in the pub, and then
Yeah.
I'm in the next pub down the road after that. If you're not there, so then you'll catch up with us or you won't.
Yeah, that's it. Usual. Boom. All right. See you later.
Anyway, so we know we're limited for time, Dave, with yourself being a busy man. So let's get into it. You know, let's just from the start. You know, how did you get into demolition? Your first role, route into the industry, expectations versus reality type of question, really.
First role really is well, it was like more like diamond drilling. So my dad used to own a diamond drilling company, Silent, and I was at college at the time, and he just said, so he come home one weekend, and he said one week, and he said, "Do you want to work the weekend?" And I just made the stupid mistake of going, "Yeah, what's that doing?" And he's Irish, for dad, and he turned around and went, "Never ever ask me what you're doing. It's a yes or a no, right? Do you want to work the weekend?" I went, "Yeah, okay, I'll work the weekend." So I went up to Ealing Town Hall. He said, "Right, there's going to be two Geordie fellas there." He said, "You've got to meet them. All you're doing is being a water boy, basically, doing a bit of fetching and carrying." Well, these two didn't turn up. So got to about 10 o'clock in the morning. And no mobile phones, nothing then. I just thought, well, how hard can it be? Because I've met some of the blokes who work for my dad. You know, and I thought, it can't be hard. Then I set the rig up, and I was about 3 feet away from where it should have been, and I thought, right, there's a little bit more science to this than what I thought. So got it all set up, started drilling a hole, then realised I'm still a bit too far away. I had to strip it all down, and these rigs back in the day were bloody heavy. So got it all set up again, started drilling again, there's water everywhere. I just thought you turn the tap on, and that's it. And it was like the floor was all flooded. It took about an hour and a half to clear all the water up, and I thought, right, let's have a stop and think about this. It's now about 12:30. There's 37 holes to drill for a RSJ, like encased in concrete. And I'm like, well, so far I've drilled half a hole, like the depth of it. And I thought, oh, well, I'll tell him later on anyway. So got all set up again, drilled the first hole, boom, moved along. I left site about 8 o'clock that night, and I drilled something like 12 holes. And I was staying at my girlfriend's, so I went straight to hers, boom, back on the Sunday, and then I finished all the holes, left there about 11 o'clock at night, because I remember he said to me, he said, "It's really important this job gets done, some, you know, I've done something with the client, he was a good mate of his or whatever." So I've literally walked in the house at about 12:30. He's gone absolutely mental. "Where the bloody have you been? Your mother's been worried." Chat. And I said, where the fuck do you think I've been? The state of me. I was absolutely coated in greasy water and all sorts. And we had a big row. Didn't speak to him for another week. So he come in on the, and I said to him, "Your job's done," but all the rest of it was a big old palaver. He come in on a Thursday, and that's when people used to get paid like the cash money, wage slip in the brown envelope on a Thursday usually. And he come in and he said, "There's your money." And I, like an idiot, I said, "You can stick your money up your arse, I don't want it." He's still having a proper row with him. And he said, that's another mistake you made. He said, the first one was asking me where you was working, what you was doing. He said, 2, never turn money down. He said, are you stupid? He said, I brought you up better than that. So I left it there for 3 days. Now, bear in mind, I was at college at the time and always needed a bit of money. And it was killing me. I just wanted to know what was in the envelope. And I just thought, no, he's not getting it. Saturday morning, and I just thought, oh, bucks, I've got to open it. And it was like quite a bit of money, back then. And that's what turned me head. I thought, cool, that's good money. And then literally started doing a bit of diamond drilling, and then worked for a demo company in Surrey, and Danny the Thief. And oh my God, that was an experience and a half. I mean, the name says it all. And there's a lot of people out there that know it. I mean, he died a couple of years ago. And it just progressed from there, to be honest. And then worked at Robot Cuts, a few other companies, and then John F. Hunt's, 2001. And then went to Dubai, done a bit of work out there, 2009, 2010. And then come back, worked for General Demolition. And then from there, started Berkeley in 2014. And I must admit, I thought it'd be a lot easier than what it is. It's, some of the jobs that we worked on years ago, like Whiteley's at Bayswater when it was first demolished, it's just like getting bricks out, getting timbers out. He was selling them. He used to send me to the betting shop with £1,000, back in the day, to put bets on horses and all the rest of it. And it was just always cash flying around and everything else. You just think, oh, this is easy, isn't it? And this, but now, the paperwork, the safety audits, the trails, everything else, I must admit, it's totally different running your own business in demolition to actually doing demolition. It's like it's 2 different things. I mean, as you said before, Mark, people think it's easy. You see a scaffold up, it's there for 6 weeks, next minute the scaffold's down, the building's gone. It's all behind that facade that people don't see.
I remember as a kid, like when I was looking at, like, I don't know what it was, but demolition is probably the one part of construction that I can think about and remember, like, from when I was a kid, because, like, you can see, apart from like Bob the Builder, like you can see like the massive like it's probably nothing like this at all nowadays, but like the big like balls, like the wrecking ball sort of things that go into the buildings, and then you got all the explosions and stuff like that, which looks insane. But it's was it always the plan to get into demolition, David? Like when you started, sort of out at the diamond drilling, did you sort of see that and get inspired?
I was doing a computer programming course at college and an aviation course. It's the furthest thing from my mind, But as I said, doing that weekend and then seeing the money, that I was getting, and it didn't treat me any different. When I worked for my dad, I was like the bottom of the ladder. I got all the shit jobs. He'd ring a client and say, "Oh yeah, that's right. I'll send my boy. He'll do that." And I worked on a job in Red Hill shopping centre for like 18 months, and putting a crane up, like to drop the lifts in over weekend. I was on site for 36 hours. Cool. Nobody else would do it, and I ended up treading on a bloody nail going right through my foot.
And do you think from the outside, Dave, people think, people that aren't in demolition think, it's just knock it down and clear it. From your own perspective, how far off are they?
Yeah, I mean, some jobs it is that simple. If it's a factory in the middle of an old industrial estate that's derelict and everything else, it can be quite simple. It just depends on the actual structure. But you're working in the city, working in the West End, you're in a live environment, you've got pedestrians walking past, you've got traffic walking past, you've got a load of lorry, just even like a soft strip of a building, you've got to get all that material out safely without affecting any of the stakeholders around you. Now people want the job done, but they don't want to see it being done, they don't want to hear it being done. So noise is the other big driver on jobs as well. So everything is, the more modern technology's got and equipment's got, they want the building down, but I don't want to hear it and I don't want to see it. Obviously nobody wants dust flying around in the environment anyway. Nobody wants to inhale dust that sort of stuff, noise. But unfortunately, you're always going to have that noisy aspect of demolition.
So, like,
You know.
how much? Sorry to cut you off, David. There, I just wonder, like, I mean, how much planning sort of goes into something like that? Because obviously, like, versus smashing it up. So I can imagine if you're sort of getting, destroying a building or whatever. I mean, maybe like you say, depending on the environment, that could take quite a bit of time. But yeah, how much planning goes into these sorts of things?
Again, depending on the type of job. It's we're doing a cut and carve at the moment up near Liverpool Street and Wilson Street. So we looked at that job. Funny enough, I stripped the building out back in about 2013. Then it got refurbished into a bank headquarters. Then another company stripped it out again 18 months ago. So we started looking at that most probably last June. So last year. Tendered it, and then obviously you're going through all the aspects of like back propping. So we're cutting half the roof off, and it's concrete building. So we're cutting half the roof off, all the concrete mansard comes off. So then you have to look at what equipment you're using, the loadings of it. So CDS have done all the calculations for what equipment we can use, like the weight on the slab, how much concrete can actually go on the slab. We've got to keep clearing it. You can't just let it pile up, so it's a metre deep everywhere and then think, oh, we'll clear it now. So it's a process where we're saw cutting it, breaking it, crunching it, clearing it, and that's the ongoing process. So you're maintaining the integrity of the building all the time, and obviously you're mindful of everything around you as well, the impacts it's having on neighbours. There's a hotel right next door to us, so the party wall, there's bedrooms the other side. So you've got to be mindful of that as well. I mean, we're getting rid of the debris of like all the arisings, so we're using boat skips, and you discharge into the back of a tipper lorry, and then you get to the top of it, and then obviously you can have a bit of spillage, from a boat skip, get to the top of the load or whatever. So we're using 40-yard bins instead, lorry mounted. Lorry's got scale on it, so we know the tonnage we can put in it, but it gives you that extra bit of safety as well. When the crane lifts the boat skip and it tips it, you can get a bit of movement on it. Well, in the 40-yard bin, it's contained. So there's no debris going anywhere. So it's all things like that you've got to think of as well. Again, because it's Wilson Street, it's a busy road. There's 2 other projects on there at the moment, so the construction traffic is, it's horrendous every day. So there's a whole load of different things that go into it. And then there's your site team as well. Your site team, the ones that are doing the project, and they make or break.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you that, Dave. I was going to get on. We normally get onto skills and labour and stuff like that. Most people, I would presume, you think, as Charlie said, when he was younger, you look at some demolition there, and it was all about just smashing it down. So you think that the skill of the operator perhaps isn't, as good. But what let's talk about people. How hard is it to find a good operator, and what makes a good operator?
It's your whole site team as well. It can be from just the labourers you've got on site to like your site manager, your site operatives. I mean, a good machine operator, no matter what bit of kit they're operating, they're invaluable. From maintaining that piece of kit, and as we all know, how much Brocs cost, how much a 20-tonner costs nowadays, or a high reach. You look at the cost of that. It's a massive investment for a company. And you look at some of the bigger companies, and they've got 3 or 4, high reaches and a fleet of machines and everything. So it's a massive investment. And if the operator isn't looking after that bit of kit, the downtime obviously is costing you anyway. Your prelims, everything on the job, and it can cost your reputation. So it's hard to get. I mean, I've got one guy, Mark. He's been with me. We've worked together for about 32 years now. And whatever I've done, he's always been with me, and he's like, he's my right-hand man. He's an extension of sort of me on site, because we know how each other works and all the rest of it. And I've got total faith in him. When he's on a project, that it's going to be done exactly the right way.
So do you think, with the cost of machines, you touched on something interesting there, with the cost of machines, and some demolition machines can be upward of 500,000. if you haven't got the right operator or you can't find the right operator, you wouldn't invest in that kit? Is that what we're saying? Because it's just going to sit and get abused, or?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it with companies. I've seen two brand new machines on a site, and one has reversed into the other one on day one.
Wow.
And literally done the whole side of the machine. And if that was me, one, after I've been mopping my tears up, two, I'd just be going absolutely mental. I've seen on a job years ago someone trying to crunch concrete with a shear, and I threw the fella off site myself. I said, he went, "Well, who are you?" And I went, "It doesn't matter who I am, mate. Get out of that machine." I said, "I'll pull you out. Honest to God, you're gone. You can't sack me out." I said, "I can do anything I like, mate." And this way, I was working for a company at the time, and I just thought, because if I go back and tell the boss what I've just seen, he'll come. I don't know what he'll do to you.
So is there a bit of a kit, David? Sorry, I cut you off again then, didn't I? Yeah, is there a bit of kit that you couldn't live without? Something that's essential for you guys?
To be honest, we do more cut and carve demolition than full top-down demolition. So for us, remote control Brock Husqvarna machine to us is essential. They're a great piece of kit.
Is that because of the safety element? We're going, so because demolition has got a bit of a reputation, does it? High risk and stuff like that. So, is the UK? Is it like one of the safest places in demolition? You said about Dubai. You worked in Dubai. Is how much has safety improved in the UK compared to others?
Even when I was in Dubai, it's very safe conscious. All the working practices on our sites over there were exactly what we was doing over here at the time. Obviously, you've got a language barrier, more so. But then, obviously, now you've got that on a lot of sites in the UK as well. With the influx of foreign workers and chippies and brickies, and, there seems to be more foreign workers on a site now than, ever before. But, the safety practices in this country, I think, are second to none, to be honest.
Are you, sorry to interrupt, Dave, are you okay for time, by the way?
Yeah, no, it's fine,
Okay, but I was going to say, just touching on what you was explaining there, do regulations help, or do they slow things down now with the safety side?
I find sometimes, again, this goes back to, it does me head in a bit sometimes. So, demolition, concrete cutting, that's all I've ever done. Never had an accident, and touch wood, but that's not just luck. It's the whole team. You're working with your team of people. They're all professional in what they do. They're all safety conscious. You go onto a main contractor site, and they will think we're a bit stupid. That we're all going to jump off the edge of a building, or I'm going to break a bit of concrete that we're all standing on. And just, hopefully we won't fall through the hole. That's how you get treated a lot of the time when you do demolition. You're seen as a bit of like bottom of the ladder. I mean, last year I still had someone turn around and I said, "Well, I'm not starting the job because you've got no welfare." And he said, "Well, you boys piss in a bucket in a corner, didn't you?" Maybe 1970, mate. And that's their attitude still on, when it comes to like main contracts and demolition. I said to a guy once, he jumps up literally, he went underneath a handrail, big demolition danger, do not enter the area. And one of the boys, he was doing a scissor cut on a beam, a column. So the column is just bending over nicely. It's just going, keeps heating the bottom of it, proper way to do it. He's gone, stop, what are you doing? And I've grabbed hold of him and went, what you, get over here. I said, what are you doing? He went, oh, he can't do that. And I said, it's in the method statement, it's in the risk assessments, everything, that's how you do it. And then I said, just come here and watch what he's doing. And he went, oh, that's really good actually, isn't it? Yeah. And I said, George, what's your background? And he, oh yeah, interiors. He said, like fit out, this. I said, I bet you know your way around the Dulux colour palette, didn't you? And he was like, I don't know if to be insulted by that. And I went, well, I'll take it as it is, mate.
Yeah, if the shoe fits, wear it.
I said, never ever run into a demolition area, mate, or try and distract a fella from what he's doing. I said, do you think that Ben, I'll just let him in there and going, yeah, go on, Ben, have a go, cut a column down, see how you get on with it. I said, of course not. But it's the skill set of some of the main contractors isn't up to where it should be on a demolition project.
Yeah, so the skill set changes really with the more complex of jobs, obviously.
Yeah.
So, these, what's the hardest high-rise we all look at the high-rise demolition, tight sites or underground. What's the hardest
Panel
one?
systems on flats, the old that's got to be done properly. Otherwise you'll end up with claps. So every panel has to be back propped, before the bolts are cut, like the brackets, and then crane lifted down. So they can be a bit not technical. Yeah, they're technical. Every job can be technical, but working in tight spaces in town, we use conveyors a lot. Conveyor the material out the building into the back of a lorry. Anything where you're constrained by other buildings, around you. We've done a job once back in Hunt's days, and I think there was something like 22 party water walls. From different things around in Regent Street. You imagine doing a demolition job in Regent Street, and it's just like, challenging. So I'd say in a city, jobs are the challenging ones.
So do you think with those inner city jobs then, do you think sometimes the demolition is almost more complex than the original build?
Yeah, because you look at when some of these buildings were put up, you didn't have the foot traffic, you didn't have the actual traffic on the streets, like the congestion, everything else. We're taking down buildings like from the 50s, the 60s, 70s, and London was, every city in Britain was a different place back then. And you could do different things, you could park a lorry out in the street and it was all right. Now you've got red routes, traffic rules everywhere. You can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this. You've got traffic management plans you've got to adhere to, like set by with the council, local authorities. So there's a whole load that goes into not just the demolition, but a project. But obviously we're at the forefront. We're there first, so that then sets a precedent as well.
Have you ever been on a job, David, and you thought this could go really badly wrong?
No, I don't think I have really. I mean, when I was at Hunt's, we've done some blowdowns, and we've done one up in Liverpool, Lenosa Tower, and I remember going up there on a Sunday. We went up there with John Hall, and then our health and safety manager was there, and some other people were there. And I've never seen a blowdown that up close. We'd seen it on TV and all the rest of it. And I was doing a countdown on the radio because BBC Liverpool were there filming it and everything. And I'd said to one of these engineers, I said, how do you know where it's going to land? I said, I know the charge has got. And he said, look, there's the blast. He said, there's split second between this charge going off. And he said, and that makes the building sort of fall in and then fall down in its own footprint. I went, but how do you know? And I said, you don't really know, do you? And he went, yeah. He said, Dave, he said, listen, he said, I'll see you back here in half hour. And he said, we'll walk around the footprint of the building. And I said, no, I can't see it. And there was some new houses, literally 20 metres away. And in all fairness, the building come down, and you look at their sort of like model of where it was going to come down, and it was exactly in that footprint. Fantastic.
Yeah, very skilled.
Yeah. And I think the telephone box had one broken window.
Wow.
And that was it. And I was just literally, I just stood there and I kept looking at this fella. He must have thought, what's that weirdo keep staring at me for? But I was just like, that's fantastic. That is absolutely fantastic. And I kept looking at the picture, like the model. I was going, it's almost like I could put it over the building, like overlay it. Blowdowns are a different thing again. You know, you see some of the ones that Erif have just done, Brown and Mason, and where they're separating power stations and all the rest of it. You know, it's a feat of engineering, to be honest. I think people love to see a blowdown, you know, bang, 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 and, you know, the building goes. But the amount of engineering and the thought process and the planning that goes into that is second to none.
I saw a really interesting one where Brown and Mason had got 2 chimneys of a power station, and they'd blown them in such a way that they collided with each other and disintegrated.
Yeah, yeah.
That was in Scotland,
designed.
I think.
Yeah, that's all designed, you know. And Erif done one recently, and when like a turbine hall, and when you think the machine inside, I think was about an 80-tonner, and it looked like a little Tonka toy. You know, and that's how big the power station is. So it's the only way you're going to take some of these structures down is by explosives. Where in America, they seem to explode everything.
Yeah.
This might sound like a stupid question, David, right? But bear in mind, I don't know much about demolition, okay? Apart from ripping out my house, which took me a year, I don't know much, right? But do you think, in the grand scheme of things, is it quicker building something, or is it quicker taking something down? In terms of like the whole process, I know like obviously some are going to be a lot different to others, right? Obviously, if you, I don't just mean exploding one like versus building it. I just mean like that whole process.
It depends on the structure, you know, and the size of it as well. Because obviously, if you're talking 15-story tower block in the middle of London, demolishing it and putting another one up, you know, yes, it would be quicker to strip it out and refurb it, but is it fit for purpose? You know, a lot of people recently, last couple of years, I know we should be reusing, like repurposing buildings, but then what they don't realise is, you know, when was it constructed? Is there any, you know, parts of the rebar that are rusting through? You know, there's concrete, you know, falling off the structure. You know, can the weight load into the old floors take the new interiors, that sort of stuff? But on the flip side, we're doing a job in Hampstead on a house. We don't normally get involved in house demolition, but
Wish I'd have known you a few years ago, David.
they're having a basement put in, right? And the planners have said, right, so we want one facade kept up, and the first floor of the side, another facade kept up, because you can see it from the street. Now, the bricks are modern bricks; they're not even old. You know, it's just built as it looks like an old house. That it was done in the 80s. So when you look at it, so there's 3 towers that have been put in on the inside of it. A new slab has been put in. They've piled it. They've got to do some more piling. Now the house, we done the strip out. I think it was back in November, early December, and they're just putting the 3 steel towers in now. And they've done some piling, and we're going back in 2 weeks' time to finish the rest of the demolition. Now, that could have been demolished, the basement piled and dug, and they would have been up to first floor, most ground floor, mostly putting the next floor on by now.
Bloody hell.
You know, and they haven't even dug the basement yet. And that's going to take 2 years. You know, and I just for the life of me, I just think, that has cost a fortune of money. It's going to take 2 years, and there isn't a house out there that you can't knock down and rebuild and make it look the same nowadays.
Yeah, you're so right.
You can get recycled like second-hand bricks, you know, older bricks, whatever. The stonework, you know, for the windows, you can get that made, anything, and that house could have looked exactly the same, but because of the planning, they wanted facade kept up, and it's going to be 2 years' work.
Might be to do with a mortgage as well. You know, you keep a wall up, you can get a mortgage on the property. If you knock it right down, you can't. So there might be a bit of
They needed a mortgage up there, Mark. I'll tell you now.
maybe you don't know. Anyway, look, moving on a little bit. You know, let's talk about business, Dave. So we always have people that a lot of people we have on own their own business. So. What's it like on that respect, running your own demolition business? You know, the pressure and the freedom against the biggest challenges. What's it like?
I'll be honest. I wish I never done it. In reality, I mean, you have your good days, your bad days. That's like any job. But behind the scenes, you know, people say like, you know, a duck in water. You know, it all looks sort of swan. It all looks serene on top, and all looks lovely. And we know they're like, whoa, they're paddling like mad. And that's some weeks, some months. That's what it's like. You know, last year was a particularly bad year. I think everybody can agree that construction demolition last year was absolutely one of the worst years ever. You know, for a long time. And so this year it's almost like we're playing catch up. And then you think back, well, it was like that from COVID, only like 6 years ago. You know, the whole country was hit, and then you go back, and then there was a bit of financial blip a few years before that, you know, for the country, and it just seems like we just go from one sort of like mini disaster to another in this country. You know, and everybody mostly say the same thing. You know, you have a good year, you think, oh, or a good few months, you think, right, that's it, we're on the up. And it all just goes, all just tails off again.
And do you find with those stresses sometimes is payment terms and cash flow a big challenge?
Oh, it's massive. You know, I think that's for every company out there. You know, and the sad thing is there's more construction companies go under in this country than any other industry. And you just think that's people's hard work, their livelihood, people that work for them, the supply chain, everything is taking a hit when that company goes under. And nobody sets a company up and thinks, oh yeah, well that's all right, if it goes under, I'm fine. You know, that's not people's mentality, is it? You know, when they set up a business. But, you know, the reality of it is it's bloody hard work.
What keeps you up at night more, David? Is it the job or the numbers?
It's always the numbers. Because, as I said, with the team, you have the confidence in your team that the job is fine. I've never really had a sleepless night over a job. You know, that something's going wrong or we can't get around something, or
It's the process, right?
You could have a breakdown, or, you know, something isn't as it was and you think, right, the job's got to stop, we've got to do some propping, you know, whatever. That's a process. But it's always the numbers. You know, I've got to chase him up because they've promised payment on Friday. Is it going to come in on Friday? Because I'm committed to paying the bills and the wages and whatever. And then it's Tuesday, and you think it's Tuesday evening, accountants haven't answered their phone. It's now Wednesday, accountants haven't answered their phone. I'm ringing a surveyor, I'm ringing a commercial manager, blah, blah, blah. Is my payment processed? You know, it's meant to come out Friday. Can you confirm it's coming out Friday? And then you're getting a blank from everybody. Oh, it should be come Friday, and the payment's not there.
Yeah, it's a payment charter bullshit again, isn't it? You know, that people it's just never. It's all just talk from the top. You know, that we're going to put this charter in, and it never really has worked. But let's have something positive. Give us a story, Dave. Something that sums up the demolition. What sums up demolition? Is there anything in your mind that you can tell us?
No, as much as, you know, I'm sitting here saying it is terrible and all the rest of it. I mean, you know, you do a good job somewhere and it's still enjoyable. You know, I think, would I do anything else? Could I be in an office 5 days a week? You know, or I'll get on the train every now and again, and I just think, I saw that person last week. The last time I was on the train, like last Monday or whatever, I think, yeah, it's all the usual faces. If I get on tomorrow, the next day, it'll all be the usual faces. And I thought, could I do that? No, I couldn't. You know, so we've done jobs over the years. We've had a good laugh and a good crack with people and all the rest of it. But we was doing a job in Waterloo, and we was knocking this building down. And this old girl, she used to come round every day, and she was just lonely, bless her. And I took my hard off one day, and she said, "Oh, you're the bald one. I've seen you before." She goes, "Oh, how are you?" And I'm all right, love. How are you? She goes, "Yeah." She goes, "It's fantastic what you're doing." She goes, "I've got so much more light in my lounge window now." I said, "Oh, where do you live?" Like the old flat behind. I said, "Oh, that's good." I didn't have the heart to tell her that the building going up was another 3 stories higher.
Oh, mate.
We ended up like going. I took a walk around the shops with her one day and everything, because we was just chatting. And I said, "It's going to rain in a minute. You've got to get shopping." So I walked around the shops with her, and They pulled her trolley back and all the rest of it. And I felt really sorry for her. She's obviously a bit lonely. And then she goes, well, I'm going to see you tomorrow. I said, no, I won't be here tomorrow. I'll be here on Friday. She goes, oh, well, I'll see you Friday. She goes, we'll have a nice cup of tea. I went, oh, okay. And bless her, she actually come round with 2 cups of tea.
Oh, that's brilliant.
You see things like that, but in the end, the boys are going to me, have you told her about the other building going up? I went, I can't tell her that. I can't tell her.
She found out in the end. So best or
She's sitting here now, Dave. She's sitting here now. She's talking to her neighbours and she's going,
Oh, sod.
you know, that bald bastard, he's lied to me. You know what I mean? I'll never forgive him. Then I gave him a cup of
It's really
tea.
nice, a lying
That's
bastard.
nice, Kate. Yeah,
Yeah.
unbelievable. So what's any best, you know, best and worst moments on site then, Dave?
Oh, do you know,
Or any unexpected finds? Did you find any? Have you found any cash anywhere?
for every safe we've ever found, right, there's been nothing in it ever. You know, like I say to boys, don't waste your time. But we've done one job just off Russell Square and stripped out this building. It was it'd been turned into like a nursing home. So there was like 2 buildings together. And then in one room, and this was a room faced out onto the street. So we stripped a bit of plaster off and there was a safe behind it in the wall. And it's like, that's an outside wall. It's like got to be half a brick on the back of the safe, you know, like between the windows. And the fella sent me some photos about a year later, and he turned it into a drinks cabinet. And it was a massive safe. I mean, the key was huge, you know, like one of the big old-fashioned keys. It's like, and he turned it into a drinks cabinet. And I think it's one of the best things I've ever seen, you know, like from salvage that's been reused.
But there's never no money.
No, never had no money, nothing. I mean, I've done a job in Hyde Park Gate, and the fella that lived there, I'm not an art buff, so I've walked around this house. There's Rembrandts, Picasso, all these different paintings on the wall, and I was just looking, and I was thinking, it's a bit shabby, you know, the whole house. It's well lived in. I can see why they're stripping it all out. Well, the father had moved back to his big ranch in Canada, and the son said that the family house where I grew up, it's all got to be stripped out, we're redeveloping it, you know, it's going to just modernise it, all the rest of it. So the day we took over, I phoned up the architect. I said, look, there's people walking in and out there with a load of gear, who are they? He's phoned the client. He said, oh, they're just the removal people. He said, look, anything after today that's left in there is yours, right? He said, you know, the client said, apologies for that, but, you know, they're a day behind, all the rest of it. So a couple of days into the job, I had a phone call, and then they said, there's a painting being left behind in the dining room. And I went, right, okay. I said, we'll put it to one side, I'll ring them and tell them they've left a painting behind. So I put it in the back of my truck. I'm driving around with it for a few days. I kept thinking, I better give them a call. And I said, look, the client's left a painting behind. And he said, well, technically, Dave, that's your painting. I went, no. I said, no, I don't work like that. It's not mine. You know, it's just got left behind. So about another 2 weeks, I said, it's right, it's safekeeping. I've hung it up in the office. It's still on the back seat of the truck. So I saw him a couple of weeks later, and I said, look, there's a painting. He said, oh, David, I did say anything left behind. I said, look, no. I said, what am I going to do? Try and sell a painting that doesn't belong to me? I said, I don't work like that. It's your painting. And I said, yeah, what would that be worth sort of today? You know, I said, it's not my cup of tea anyway. He went, oh, you know, about 50, 60,000 pounds.
wow.
Okay.
And he mislaid it.
He said, do you regret now saying that it's not your painting? And I went, do you know I don't? I said, because it doesn't feel comfortable to me. You know, that could have been generally a mistake that's been left behind. If you turn around and said, look, I've left a painting in the dining room, you can have it. That's a different fish, isn't it?
Yeah, great story. Yeah, well, look, we'll get on now. We ask. We'll try and wrap up a little bit. But Mark, you normally have a quick fire round, Mark.
Yeah, so a bit of a quick fire round for you, Dave. These are one word or one line answers, just straight off the top of your head.
Yep.
You ready for this? Best job.
Lenosa Tower.
Worst job.
Buckingham Gate.
Most overrated tool or trend.
Most overrated tool or trend. I don't know, to be honest. I'm never normally stuck for an answer either.
It's got you that one, isn't it?
Yeah, that's got me, to be honest.
All right. All right. Harvey's orange or yellow?
Orange.
And a one-liner for someone starting in demolition.
Don't do it.
Okay, well, look, Dave, we'll have to wrap up because everyone's, we've gone over the time. But, it sounds like to us, we've learned a little bit today, demolition is one of them industries people think they understand, but we really didn't, I don't suppose, with some of the technical aspects of it. We just thought it was about coming along with Charlie's wrecking ball, smacking it down, But look, thanks for coming on and give us some real insight into the demolition.
Yeah,
Hopefully
thanks, David.
you enjoyed it.
Thanks, David.
Thanks to everybody. Thanks to everybody.
Nice one. Cheers, fellas.
Nice one, guys. See you later.
The opinions expressed within this podcast are solely the individuals and do not reflect the opinions and beliefs of the sponsors or its affiliates.